All right, now it's on. So, I lost my train of thought. It'll come back.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Ken. That's what you were going to say.
Yes. This is one of 3 full-day events for Mythical Turtle activities. Tomorrow we have things going on at 1:30 and at 3:30. At 3:30, Introduction to Elvish. Woo! At 1:30, Dr. Berlin Flieger will be there to talk, who, if she's not the most important Tolkien scholar in the world, is number 2. See? I was being honest instead of a UMD proponent this time. But she did teach here from 1977 to 2012, so you should come and see her because she's awesome. Saturday, then, is the big marathon. Woohoo, we're watching the extended editions in the movie theater, and I have a cardboard, life-size cutout of Gandalf and of Legolas that you can take your pictures with and make your friends totally and completely jealous.
Wait, you have the camera going for this?
What's that?
You have the camera going for this?
You said to turn it on.
Oh, no, sorry. I know this is the announcements. All right.
Tonight, Ken Mondschein is talking about sword fighting in movies, which I suspect you're going to get told might possibly every once in a while not actually be how people fought.
Might be.
He is an expert in historical fencing. He worked at the Higgins Army Museum. He doesn't work there anymore, which has nothing to do with him. It's because it closed due to lack of funding, which is very sad in Boston. And I actually don't have the rest of your bio sitting right in front of me, so if there's anything else you want to add, you could add it.
I'm a college professor. No, really, I get paid to study this. It's great. And my friend Ben is going to be helping me with the actual physical part of the demos from Maryland Kunstfechten, which I'll give them a bit of a shout out. If you're interested in learning this stuff, that is, in learning actual medieval sword fighting, they are the people who you want to go to. And we're also hopefully going to YouTube this lecture because people are always interested in seeing talks like this, and it's always good to kind of educate the public, and social media gives us a really, really good way of doing that. So also thanks to Ben, I now have the awesomest lecture pointer in the world. So, medieval martial arts, fact, fantasy, and film. Why? Because it kind of alliterates that way, and that's nice. So, first thing, right? I'll give you some background info first of all, and then let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. First thing, I'm going to talk about war in Tolkien's work, right? How does Tolkien depict violence? Because this is a talk really about violence. And violence is sort of a taboo subject, particularly in the academy, right? We're much more into peace, love, happiness, human rights, other things like that. But of course, violence is unfortunately a fact of life. And it was definitely so in Tolkien's world. And in his life, of course, he was a World War I veteran. And also, it's something that was definitely true of the actual Middle Ages. And I'm going to, there's a dangerous, responsible historian meta-argument here. Make a case by the end of this that, I'm blocking the projector. What this means for the study of history. And I talk to you really about, not just about war in Tolkien's work, but I'm going to use this as an entree to talk about war in the actual Middle Ages and what that meant for medieval society. And then we'll get into, well, how do they actually fight? And I'm going to talk about arms and armor. And I'm going to talk about the production of weapons and the production of the material for violence in the Middle Ages. And I'm going to look at kind of how Peter Jackson shows it, and maybe, I really have many more issues with Peter Jackson than I do with Tolkien himself, really, because any act of interpretation, any act of translation is always going to be a betrayal. That's what there's an Italian proverb that the translator is also the traitor. So in a sense, translating things is also in a sense betraying it. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about the kind of the meat of what we're going to be talking about, which is how they really fought. How did they fight in the Middle Ages? What did they do? What was and how do we know this? right? And that, of course, gives me an entree to talk about my subject of study, what I do, which is the Fechtbook, right? Which is this genre of medieval writings, which Tolkien didn't study. He didn't really know about them because the study of them is actually fairly recent. And I'm going to talk about that source and what they mean, what they could tell us about the Middle Ages, and how they can be related to things that historians like to talk about, like, you know, birth of nation states and the history of science. Because of course, as historians, right, we don't just talk about the stuff that interests us, our nerdy little pleasures. We have to make everything relevant and socially useful, because, you know, otherwise why would the state of Maryland, or in my case Massachusetts, pay my salary, right? So, moving right ahead. First of all, Tolkien knew war. Tolkien was a World War I veteran. And he never really thought of himself as a hero. In World War I, if you know anything about World War I, people have been gearing up for this for quite some time. There was widespread militarism at Tolkien's private school. You'll forgive me, I don't remember the name, but at his school there was a corps of cadets, and he joined up. All the boys joined up. They marched around with uniforms and practiced their riflery and things like that. But he tried to put off his military service, which is forbidden. If you've seen Downton Abbey, there's a scene where they have a chamber music recital, and anyone who's not in the army is given a white feather. This is what it was really like. There's tremendous social pressure to join up to the army, because the war was seen as good and right, and everyone had been gearing up for it for years and years and years. So, as a matter of fact, when he was at the University of Oxford, he's finishing up at Oxford, there were only 25 other students, all men, of course, at that time, at Oxford in his last year, because everyone else had dropped out to go join the army. So he joins up, and if you know anything about his life, he got trench fever. I mean, the life in the trenches was horrible. The Germans had slightly comfier trenches because they're actually digging in for the long haul. But the French and also the English trenches were muddy and damp. And he contracted trench fever, which is spread through lice. And he only spent a total of 10 days on the front lines in actual combat, because you were rotated in and out of combat. But that was enough, right? Because these 10 days were at the Somme, which is one of the bloodiest, worst battles of the war. And in fact, people were killed completely senselessly, like, by stray shells, which he later got how the Nazgul sounded, that keening sound, from the sound of shells dropping on unsuspecting soldiers. And, of his best friends, there's a group of 4 kind of literary-minded students from his private school. They used to meet and drink tea together, and kind of, pre-inklings, if you would. Of them, 2 of them were killed in the war, right? And that's about par for the course. Some places in England, 40% of the young men got killed in World War I. When you learn about appeasement, like, think of that, right? Everyone vilifies Chamberlain. Think of that when you learn about how Chamberlain appeased him. If he had not gotten sick, if he had not come down with trench fever, he probably would have gotten killed himself. By the way, the mustache, interesting, required by regulations at the time. That's right. So, yes, Tolkien has a dorky mustache there, but we'll forgive him, he had to. What effect did this have on Tolkien's writing? Well, I mean, we can't really say, because there are hints in his writings and his letters, but my feeling is that he was a lot like my grandfather. My grandfather fought in World War II, and he never liked to talk about it. My uncle fought in World War II. People who have really been there and seen the elephant, they tend not to tell stories about it, but doubtless The Lord of the Rings was one of his ways of dealing with that. And particularly, the mechanized warfare, this industrial warfare, because Tolkien hated industrialism, right? He was, really a continuer of the romantic tradition in British literature. So, in many ways, sort of like Beowulf itself, great object of his scholarly study, this writing was a way in which he coped with his own war trauma. And so, this is, this is a fairy tale. There's no play-by-play. There's no how-to. There's really kind of two modes of writing about fighting in Tolkien. There's Legolas and Gimli, right? They're playing a game, they're having fun, they're keeping count, right? And it's like nothing can touch them, right? Or it's really about their friendship, right? The orcs are just a means of keeping score, which is like totally racist and imperialist too, and very disturbing. But, so it's like it's like they're playing golf, right? It's like like, oh, good shot, Legolas. I've got 3. And like Gimli just he's caught in a sand trap, the poor guy, right? So it's totally unrealistic. But then there's also the Hobbit's point of view, right? And Aragorn's kind of the same way, right? And there's kind of like this like heroism to him, right? And he he's so valiant. He just cuts through everything in Pelennor Field and just meets up with Faramir and they're like, hey bro, how you doing? So it's so that's this is totally above the Hobbit's heads because who is he identified with? Obviously the Hobbits, right? And for them, it's probably what it was like for him. It's a horrifying experience, a terrible experience, that they have to rise up to it, right? Because he didn't think he could do it either, but they was thrust into the trenches in World War I, and he has to fight, right? And remember that World War I, yeah, it was long range, planes, tanks, all that, but it was also hand to hand. It was also storming the trenches. So bear that in mind when you read Lord of the Rings. I mean, we think of him as Tolkien as this gentle English professor, but he was somebody who, had been there, had done that, right? In a way that I think modern academics who study his writing just really don't appreciate. And, think of any of it, the Battle of Balin's Tomb, any of it, right? The Hobbits are terrified. The Hobbits are basically like Tommies in the trenches at World War I. In World War I, they have to rise to it. And Frodo is a lot like Tolkien. Frodo comes back with the same sort of PTSD, if you want to read it that way, right? From the Ring, right? What is the Ring? The Ring is all of industrialism. It's the will of power, right? And that's what gives Frodo PTSD. I mean, there's no cure for it. He gets some refuge in his writing from history, but ultimately, the only healing is in Valinor. The only healing is by going to the West, which is, of course, why Tolkien went to California later in life and tried to but I mean, if you want a literary depiction of someone with PTSD after a war, I mean, look at Frodo. That's what he can't reintegrate into society. And Pippin and Merry, they change and they become kind of gung ho, don't they? They're kind of like picking fights with Saruman's guys and scouring the Shire, and they're Sam is just steadfast, but Frodo just can't have any more of it. They kind of become heroic. But they're not really, the character who Tolkien identifies with. He really, Frodo is that, and Frodo is what happens when you take a reasonable person and put them in that sort of unthinkable situation, right? So, war does not make one great, as another short heroic figure once said. Peter Jackson, by the way, not a heroic figure, obviously, not like Tolkien, never been in a war. So we'll forgive him for what he's been doing. This, of course, is a very bad photo of Peter Jackson, who looks much better after he lost a lot of weight and wears tuxedos at premieres and all of that. By the way, I will not be discussing the Hobbit movies in this talk because I saw the first one, and after seeing the pinball fight, you know which one I mean?
Yeah.
I was like, no, man, no. Sorry, you're not ruining my childhood, so. No. Just scoured that and the Star Wars prequels just scoured from my brain. It's great. Let's talk about actual medieval warfare, right? To do a little comparing and contrast. First thing, when we think about medieval warfare, we think of these set-piece battles. This is actually a 15th century illustration, later 15th century illustration of the Battle of Agincourt, I believe. And it gives us the idea of what we think battles are like, right? Think Braveheart, right? You guys line up over there, we'll line up over here, count 3, we'll run at each other and yell, okay? This almost never happened. If you look at the entirety of the 100 Years' War, which lasted 100 years, from between Britain and France, there are basically 3 big pitched battles. There's some other minor ones too. But really Crécy, Agincourt, and Poitiers are like the three big ones. Why? Because this is not how people really fought in the Middle Ages. This was not the battle. Castles. Castles are the key to holding land. Why? Because it's expensive to get guys in the field. Look at how much money our government spends on a standing army. Look at how much the Acadians spent on a standing army. I mean, this is a major, driving your queens in the floor, sorry. This is a major reason for the growth of states, of governments, is to have standing armies. It's much cheaper to fortify your town, because towns are fortresses too. It's much cheaper to build a castle, to build a fortress. And that will hold, you can control a great deal of territory with that. If you look at, maps, right, they don't put castles, in like the fortified hinterlands, right? They don't put them in the hills or, on the borders. No, they put them in the farmland. Why? To control the peasants and to control the farmland. So think of it like Helm's Deep, right? Where they all go? Well, we can't stand against Saruman's forces. Let's go to Helm's Deep. And it's very, if you don't have an infinite army of orcs, it's actually kind of dangerous and expensive to mount a siege. It takes a long time. You're camped out. The porta potties don't get cleaned that often. Everyone gets diphtheria, right? Everyone gets sick.
Dysentery? Is that what
right? Yeah.
Dysentery?
Dysentery, that's what
at?
not diphtheria. Dysentery. The other thing. Ebola. No, no, they don't have, but, so sieges are difficult and they're expensive to mount. And, if you think about it, actually, Tolkien kind of mirrors this, because a lot of the big battles, Helm's Deep, Pelennor Fields, Pelennor Fields is they're relieving the siege of Minas Tirith, aren't they? And then outside the gates of Mordor, right? Aren't they besieging Mordor? Aren't they coming to besiege Mordor? And Sauron's like, yeah, all right. I see your little army. I raised you 40 billion orcs, right? So most of the big battles tend to be in Lord of the Rings tend to be outside fortresses, right? There's at these strong points. So actually, that's a point in Tolkien's favor. That's where you're going to see this kind of stuff. With the course, so if you don't have big battles, what do you do, right? Chevauchée. You got your Faramir's, right? You've got your Faramir's raiding behind the lines. Or like what Sauron did, right? Because Faramir's a good guy, and of course orcs don't like farm. You can't go burn their fields, right? So you've got this idea of destroying the other person's economic base. That's what Edward the Black Prince does during the 100 Years' War. He just goes raiding all about the French countryside, drawing Jean II, right, King Jean the Good, out to try to fight him, right? Try to stop him, to show he's a good king and he can defend his people. So this, there's the scenes in Lord of the Rings where Saruman is like, sending the orcs. And the orcs are going to, burn the poor village of the Rohirrim, and you have the whole touching scene of, mom sends the son and the daughter out on the horse. Well, that sort of stuff is really what would happen, because that actually makes military sense. It's not just, Saruman's not just being a dick. He's doing this because this is how you shame the people, the king, right? This is how you're showing Theoden is no real king, and he's undermining his power. So if you want to think of it, it's actually a big game of prisoner's dilemma. If you've ever done game theory, you got a choice, right? You're burning my field. I could sit here in my castle and control my land and I'm safe, or I can chase you, but you're probably doing it as the Black Prince did, and you're going to choose the field for battle. You're going to fortify it. I have to assault you, and then it's a good likelihood I'm going to be defeated. So if you're the attacked party, it's a lose-lose situation. Okay. We call this Vitigian warfare after the Roman writer Vitiges, and this is as old as civilization. Chinese warfare is the same principles. We see the same thing. We see the same thing of Hannibal attacking the Romans and destroying their countryside. And what do the Romans eventually do? They go in and attack Carthage in Africa, right? Scipio Africanus goes and they go and they attack Carthage, and Hannibal gets involved. The other thing is that we like to think of the armored knight as supreme on the battlefield. But the armored knight was not always, and maybe never, was the supreme force on the battlefield. This is a very old way of thinking, right? That, well, the stirrup gave rise to the knight, which gave rise to the feudal system. right? Because he's the unstoppable weapon. This was something that historian Lynn White Jr. came up with in the 1950s as there was a nuclear arms race and there were Sputniks going overhead, right? That it's the technologically advanced society that's going to be the triumphant society. And to a certain extent, that can be true when you have things like Gatling guns against, Maasai with spears. But in the Middle Ages, there were a number of other sorts of troops that were also incredibly important. So for starters, right, archers and pikemen, they can threaten knights. You could shoot through, at least, you can shoot through armor, most armors. If you're a good longbowman or if you have a crossbow, these things are made to defeat armor.
But that's only at very close range.
It depends. I mean, the English are apparently very, very effective at fairly long ranges at Agincourt. And if you find and think you've got a bodkin head, it goes up and it comes down with quite a bit of force too, and you've got a lot of them. They're finding the horses, right? Because you're not just thinking about the knight, the horse, right? You shoot a horse with an arrow, you got a problem. You try controlling a horse that's been shot with an arrow. Hard enough controlling them as it is. So, so you've got that, right? You've got also the rear of the armor was more vulnerable, and they learn at Poitiers they armored the fronts of the horses, but they didn't arm the back. So, and then of course even then, what the English do, they dismounted, right? And they reinforced the foot troops with armored men at arms. So you had this sort of reinforced ground force. And they could sort of like I'll show you the clip later, right? They could withstand the charge, right? The Scots did this. The Scots did this at Bannockburn, right? So finally, the other thing you need to keep in account is cities and towns. The middle class, this is a society in which to have political freedom, to have a say in government, was to bear arms. So this is actually from, I stole this from John. This is actually the guilds of Strasbourg, which is of course a city in the Rhineland, and it's a free city of the Holy Roman Empire, and then they are marching out to battle. So if you were a member of a guild, right, in other words, if you had a vote, if you had a say in the running of your town, you also did military service, right? This is sort of this middle class military ethic. It was expected that if you were a free person, especially if you lived in a town, that you would be doing military service, that you would own weaponry, and you would know how to use it. For the most part, bows, crossbows, but also swords to some extent, right, and infantry weapons. So even though, right, so Tolkien loves his heroes, right? Tolkien loves his Aragorns, he loves his Faramir's, he loves his Boromirs. But even though these guys are at the top of the class system, right? They're the guys who are paying guys to write songs about them, right? Songs being, they're the ones who are being, praised in stories. These are not the only guys who matter on the medieval battlefield. In fact, far from it. They're just, snobbier than the rest. Okay, so that's just the process of medieval warfare. So the question then you probably have is, how do we get from that sort of warfare to this mechanized warfare of Tolkien's experience? This warfare of where it's not predicated on castles, but something like World War I, which is siege warfare, but of another sort. How do you turn into things like the Somme and Verdun? And this is like a really, really quick explanation with a flowchart of a historical process. And it goes like this, okay? It's because of gunpowder, and not because gunpowder could shoot through armor. They just made heavy armor, right? They had bulletproof armor. It was expensive, it was heavy, it was a pain in the butt, but it worked. What happened even more, though, was the need to have large standing armies. This is my argument about states and the growth of the state. So they developed cannon, right? And a cannon can subdue a fortress. Look at Constantinople, 1453. The Turks knock a hole in the wall of Constantinople, take the city. So your castles and your fortresses, they don't work as well. So what are you going to do? Well, you need to give battle. Well, in open battle, advantage goes to the person with the biggest army. So you need to get the biggest army, and it's much cheaper to get 100 guys with long sticks, which is a pike square, than it is to get one armored knight. So, where's the wise money, especially considering that a pike square, is really hard for any number of armored knights to install. So you're going to need a couple things. One, you need a big standing army, but then how are you going to pay for that? Well, you're going to need a government. You're going to need a way to skim that surplus wealth off of your population. In other words, you're going to need a bureaucracy, and you need some organization. In other words, you're going to need a state. You're going to need some sort of central, you're going to need to control your territory centrally. And so you start having standing armies, you start having the idea of the nation state, and this ultimately is going to turn into World War I. Tolkien, on some level, was of course aware of this, and it's obvious that he is not really much for these ideas of, there's this, bit of ambiguity there. He's very much for the common man, right, for the Tommy. That's Sam. And that's Frodo, right? But he puts these guys in the middle of the heroic age, right? In the age of Norse sagas and Beowulf and that kind of thing. So, he's kind of praised. It's this really strange insertion of his modernity and his reality into a saga, into a tale, right? Oh, Mr. Frodo isn't just like one of those stories. Yeah, it is. So, all right. By the way, as these nation states were developing, and this is, yes, I have to bring the rapiers into it, sorry. This is Camillo Agrippa, and it says new ideas of art and science there. So basically, as this is happening, there's new forms of, battles or in vendetta, right? Feuds between large groups of people is being replaced by duels between two. It's a civilizing process, believe it or not. And the new way of fighting, right, which is also a court entertainment, right? It's also an art that you would be taught, just like riding and dancing, if you're a well-educated person of means, is going to reflect these new ideas of science and geometry and aesthetics, right? You can see here Agrippa is labeling everything according to fencing by the numbers, as it were, right? And explaining everything geometrically. He fights as you would sing Prick song. Rest is minim rests, 1, 2, and the third new rest, right? As Mercutio says at Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet. I probably quoted that wrong. Shakespeare scholars will have to correct me. Well, that's where that's coming from. And it has everything to do with that style of performance. So, martial performance, right, just as in the Middle Ages, it's important to the upper crust and to anybody pretending to be anybody, but it changed with the times. And in the same way, at least in France and Belgium, they're having fencing guild meetings and fencing guild competitions in the middle class and these guilds up until Napoleon goes away. And they're probably having Fechtschule, right? Fencing, I believe they're having, I had to ask Matt Gallis, but they're probably having Fechtschule up until really Napoleon takes over Europe and says, this is the ancien regime, we got to get rid of this. So really until the early 1800s, right? As long as there's a Holy Roman Empire, they're doing medieval styles of combat. It's part of their culture, it's part of their society. Okay, so we've dealt with the place of fighting in arms and armor in the Middle Ages. Let's look now at the actual stuff they used and how it tells us about their society. So this is a Spangenhelm, means strap helm in German, from the 6th century, the migration era. What do you notice about it? What's it made out of?
Looks like iron.
All right, it's made out of iron, right? One piece of iron? No,
There's
what?
2 bands.
Yeah, bands of iron, and then there's iron filling that in. And you can see some of it's corroded and some of it's not. It's pretty ornamented, yeah. But it's also made of different pieces of metal, right? So this is the sort of thing that Tolkien, that they used in the era Tolkien was writing about, right? That the Beowulf era, right? The saga era. This is what he kind of equips his guys with, right? This is what sort of weapons they have, right? This is another example. This is the Sutton Hoo helmet. It's an Anglo-Saxon grave find. It has a mustache. It's a guy's face, right? Just like Tolkien in World War I. You see? The classic British martial mustache. But this is the excavated state. That's a reconstruction, right? Highly decorated thing. Why? Because you took your wealth with you. Most wealth in Anglo-Saxon England was portable. So where would you put your wealth? You put your wealth into your helmet. So that's the Sutton Hoo helmet, right? Again, lots of pieces of metal put together. Okay. The preeminent body armor, which sort of armor would you wear? You'd wear mail, right? Here is, of course, this is a 12th century knight. In mail, here's a mail maker. Why? Because you can take whatever bits and bobs of iron you had and draw them into wire, and there you go. He's drawing it through wire, draw plate, ancient technology. And you put it around a mandrel, you spin it up, right? Hammer it flat, you put rivets through it, and you've got mail, right? There you go. So you don't need, it's very, very labor intensive. Anyone ever try to make chainmail? Just linking stuff together, right? Everyone, so many of us did when we were teenagers. Like, mom says, where'd all the coat hangers go? Where are all the coat hangers? Yeah, so, look at my hauberk, Mummy. Yeah. I'm going to be a knight. But, of course, this is, and you can see in the background there, right? It's close up there. I could have brought some mail. I've got some in my car, but I thought instead I'd just show you there, the rivets and such. This is much more efficient because you don't have a lot of good iron. Let's look at this. Let's look at the iron pack. So this is sort of in the movies, right? This is what we see amongst the Rohirrim in the movies, right? There's Eowyn, right? She's got her. Look, it looks just like the Sutton Hoo helmet. And look, she's wearing mail, and she's got this. Of course not. She's a girl. She's no man. Maybe she should have had a mustache. You thought I was a man, silly witch king of Agmar. Don't let the mustache fall. Oh, the mustache was just on the helmet. Oh, how could I have been so foolish? Damn it, I've been stabbed in the ankle by a hobbit. Poor witch king of Agmar. I really feel for the guy. No. Why? Because iron smelting technology was difficult and time consuming, and I'm going to say right now, I ripped off these images from some friends of mine, Daryl Markowitz and Wareham Forge, give them a shout out. Up in Canada, they do Viking Age iron smelting. They've done it at Landshoffs Meadows in Newfoundland, the Viking site. And this is an example of earlier 2 years, right? This is how you would smelt out some iron in the Viking Age. This is Beowulf era iron making. Here's a diagram, which I stole from them. Sorry guys, thanks. So it's basically like a big clay pot, right? Here's a smelter, it's a cob, right? Like a pipe cob. You've got a tuyere there to get some air in, right? Because what are you doing? You take ore and you reduce it. It's chemical reduction. So you need oxygen going in, and it's very, very hot, and you create carbon monoxide. You burn up the carbon, and you get iron. And it's full day's work, and this is Daryl, and there they are, right, smelting away. And what they're doing is they're consolidating the plume. They've got this big spongy mass of iron. You can see it's orange hot, and they're hitting it with hammers. And if you're lucky, right, this particular experiment, they took 18 kilograms of ore and they got 3 kilograms of iron. And mind you, not all of that's good enough for use for armor. I mean, a lot of that's going to, be just junk. You can only use the really good stuff, especially for swords. I mean, that's why they were so into axes and spears. I mean, look how much metal is in this, right? You got like maybe half a sword is worth of decent iron in there. It's also why Viking swords were all layered. I probably should have had a Viking sword layering example, right? That's why Eowyn's sword's so small. So, of course, now, in Tolkien's books, right, the Gondor is about the same level of armor technology as the Rohirrim, but let's look at what they got in the movies here, kids. Well, you got your bascinet, you got a helmet here, you got some plate armor, still got some mail, but they got lots of large pieces of plate there, don't they? These Gondorians, right? in the books, right, they have some ancient mithril helmets, but they're basically the same as the Rohirrim, military equipment style. And of course, the orcs have even more inferior stuff. Well, as time went on, medieval armor technology improved. This is from church carving in Spain, right? He's got this round top helm. He's got this very much a cutting sword. Doesn't have much of a point. He's got mail, really big mail, because it's hard to carve mail in stone. He's got a big shield. Shields are really important. Shields are really important in Tolkien. I should probably have a slide on shields. When you have shields when you don't have good body armor. That's when you have it, right? So if your main defense is mail, then shields are really good, right? Because they're not going to turn very much. What do you notice, right? What do you notice about this great helm from about 1300?
There's a flat top.
Flat top, yeah, what else do you notice about it?
Riveted together.
It's still riveted together, right? What else? Big pieces of iron, little piece of iron?
Big.
Slightly bigger, right? Not really big pieces of iron, but slightly bigger, right? Because they can make a bigger piece of iron now, and they're not as worried about failure. There's a story about William Marshall, famous 12th century knight, who had to actually have his helmet. He was in a tournament, and his helmet got so deformed he had to put his head on a blacksmith's anvil and have him pound out. You know, imagine he had a migraine afterwards. Actually pound it out so he would get his head out of it, right? I'm talking about here of soft iron, right? This is maybe a sign of slightly better iron technology by 1300. And this is from the Higgins collection. The visor is associated, as is the aventail, right? But that is a pig-faced bascinet. That's raised from one piece of iron. I'm saying iron, not steel, because steel is iron plus carbon. And they were very, very, very inexact with the metallurgy, right? It's not like that. So it's raised out of really one piece of iron. Of course, the visor is another piece of iron. This is something that means you're getting more and better quality iron. In the same way, we can see it through the 14th century, right? At first, you're getting these reinforcements. This is actually from, I think it's now from Russia or the Baltic, someplace in the Baltic, maybe Latvia or Estonia. Actual reinforced leather arm defenses. And you can see here in this German, this reproduction of a German funerary carving, where it's these little pieces of mail reinforced. Germany was, by the way, more materially poor than the rest of Europe. So you see older forms of armor kind of persist a little longer there. Not necessarily in style, but in construction. And as time goes on, this is still called Visby coated plates, larger pieces of iron, here kind of driven into a poncho kind of garment, overlapping, larger pieces of metal, pure pieces of metal. Whoop, sorry. So, right, that was it. So why? Why did this happen? Better weapons? I mean, that's kind of the technological argument, right? That idea that it's weapons that, the weapons race, the arms race drives human civilization forwards. Very much a Cold War way of thinking. Well, not really. I mean, they had crossbows and longbows for a long time. Gerald of Wales, in I think the 13th century, describes a longbow arrow, Welsh longbow, shooting through a knight's leg, his saddle, his mail, both sides of his mail, right, both sides of his leg, into his saddle, into his horse, stapling him to the horse. So, and you can imagine the horse then didn't like that very much and ran off. The poor knight stapled to him. So, which is one way to avoid an emergency dismount, I suppose, but that's illegal in dressage competitions. So maybe no, right? The answer, of course, is that they developed better iron technology. They developed the blast furnace. This is a 14th century German blast furnace. And these were spread by Cistercian monasteries at first. The Cistercians were the sort of the entrepreneurs of the Middle Ages. This is, of course, in a town. Notice it's near a water supply. And of course, it's a big tower devoted, it's that clay cob writ large. It's huge. So they're getting more and better iron, right? Not all of which is useful for weapons and armor, but enough of it is. And this, in turn, is related to being able to use water power. They don't have coal power in the Middle Ages. They do have water power, and they know how to use it. there's a water wheel. Here's a 16th century woodcut of a water wheel. You see the water wheel turning this axle with pallets on it, which in turn pick up and drop trip hammers. I think this is for a paper pull mill. But you can hook it up to anything, right? You've got the power, right? So this was known. This was used. This was used in industry. This was used in cloth manufacture and fulling for cloth manufacture. This was used for trip hammers in pounding out iron plate, and it was used for powering bellows for the blast furnaces, because you need a big and constant supply of oxygen to do that reducing process for the for smelting the iron. So the thing is, this really could only come about after the Black Death, right? After the mid 14th century. Why? Because, well, less population, they all died. You need the water power even less to grind grain. That was kind of the big use for the water power, was to grind grain. And also because, well, for a variety of complicated reasons I won't get into right now, the noble class is more likely to rent out their properties. They're looking for additional sources of income. So instead of running the water mill and running the water rights themselves, they're more likely to rent it out to some peasant entrepreneur who's then going to turn into a fulling mill or a blast furnace. So, what's this mean for Lord of the Rings? Well, where is this? Orthrond, right? That's Orthrond, right? And of course, remember Saruman has a mind of wheels and gears, right? Saruman, who, Peter Jackson shows us this. He turns Orthrond into a sort of factory, doesn't he? Tolkien hates this, right? These manufacturing engines of war, metal war machines for the Middle Ages. So, Tolkien, and Tolkien was no doubt aware of this, because he wanted his guys, right? He wanted the good guys to have Dark Ages era armor, right? He wanted them to have, the organic local war armor, if you would. Whereas,
It's essentially our trip of hippies.
Is it elves or hippies? Elves? I mean, the elves, the elves are just hanging around in the forest, listening to the Grateful Dead.
Growing the hair out long.
Growing their hair long, not shaving. They're elves, right? They don't have to shave their elves. So, and he actually talks about that in Silmarillion. But but when Peter Jackson, bless his little soul, does, unwittingly trying to give us our Gondorian knights in shining armor, gives us industrial Gondor. Tolkien would have been horrified. No, don't they look heroic though? Their tree breastplates. No, that's no tree. That, my friends, is the Kraken of Greyjoy. So, oh, you didn't think they would get there, huh? Never turn your back on the Greyjoys. All right. So in the movies, it's not just the bad guys, the goblins and the orcs, who've got industrial capacity. It's the good guys as well. And no doubt that in the reign of King Elessar, of course, they're going to have the Industrial Revolution in Middle Earth, and they're going to chop up all the Ents and use them to power everything. And Treebeard would not have like railroad. They're going to build a monorail through Fangorn Forest. It's going to be miserable. But thankfully, he cuts out before that happens, right? Of course, in the Lord of the Rings, of course, if you have elven smiths, and he talks about improving weapons technologies. He's a bit of a positivist. But of course, if you have elven smiths who can just turn out, whatever they want, they've got mithril, right? What's better than mithril? Nothing's better than mithril, but mithril doesn't really exist, right? So if you have magic that kind of explain things away quite a bit. So the thing is, would an elven smith upgrade their technology? If you said to an elven smith, "Hey, dude, got this water powered trip hammer," we'd be like, well, "Yeah," or would he be, it wasn't good enough for the Noldor, it wasn't good enough for me. So it's you can't tell about this really. All right. The other thing I want to mention is that fashion probably has something to do with the evolution of armor, and this is the part where you have pictures of me wearing costumes. So, for which I apologize in advance, right? So this is me in my typical late 14th century armor. It's in my car right now. I'm going to go to an event after this, jousting event in Frankfort, Kentucky. Maybe I'll get to joust, I don't know. But that's me in my armor. And this is me wearing my 14th century clothing. You notice I've got kind of the same silhouette with kind of the cinched in waist, right? Kind of different from my academic clothes. But got that big pigeon chest. And it's kind of hard because I have a very modern body. People were not as big as me back then. People were small and slight. So they, but they got the same sort of length of shirt, right? Tight fitting to the legs, same way. Even I'm wearing my hood as a hat, but echoes the helmet, canal. So you've got that same kind of silhouette as you do in the clothing, right? And again, normally, right? That was from a photo shoot at the Higgins. Normally, we don't do this stuff in armor when we're actually training in historical martial arts. That's not my actual clothing. So just want to point that out. Just to point out the parts of the typical late 14th century armor. It's my bassinet, right? It's called bassinet, home school style. It's called, that's the modern appellation. This looks like a dog's head. It's breastplate. You've got an iron that is sturdy enough to have a breastplate that's not going to get penetrated. Also with it, right, you've got the array. You can kind of see it hiding up here. The array for my lance, so that means a stop. So there's a ring on the lance called a graper. And it hits the array, the stop, and my breastplate, my lance, and me, and my saddle, and my horse were one object hitting with maximum transferable energy. Question.
Were the breastplates made with pattern welding, or were they just one single?
They're just one single piece of iron.
Oh, it's not pattern welded.
It's not pattern. No, that'd be for swords.
Only for swords. Okay.
That's a sword thing, yeah. And that's really more in the age when you've got the bits and bobs of iron you got to put together.
Right.
We don't have that problem.
Did they stop doing that later on, or?
I need to look at Alan Woolman's book, but I believe that there was less of it later on. But there was more forging and tempering. And that wasn't the only way they making. There was also boot steel, which came from Damascus, which was a kind of a carbon fusion process, which was done. Some other stuff. Still in our mail hauberk underneath it. That's still my primary body defense, right? Got the mail hauberk.
Damascus steel.
Powder. Yeah. You ever hear that? Damascus steel is not pattern welded.
It's not
folded. It's something totally different.
Oh, okay.
It is. It still has to be hammered and folded. But what they did is they took the ingots of iron, they wrapped them with some carbon infusing material like leather, something. They baked them, and of course it charred. But the carbon sinks into the iron because it becomes actually semi-liquid when you heat it up, which is different from pattern welding where you're taking various different things and you're folding them together. And you still have to fold it, right? You still have to fold it, but it's a totally different process. It gives you a much higher quality steel. And the best Viking swords were made of that. Counter van braces, gauntlets. Your fingers are extraordinarily vulnerable when you're fighting, as we all know. Right? My Rondell dagger, it's an armor-piercing dagger, basically. Cuisse, pulling, reed, and which is, of course, the leg armor. Cuisse. It's all from the French words for the body, right? You know French, you know armor. Polion, greaves, my greaves, sabot, shoot. How do you put it on? Well, I got a quick arming sequence, right? I'm going to put on some armor for you now. Not really, not here. First thing, notice I'm wearing Under Armour, of course, right? So, this is me some years ago, and of course, as a reenactment event, they're helping me put on gear. So, there I've got, this is later, right? No hauberk, but why wear a whole heavy hauberk when I'm wearing a solid breast and back now? So I've got just kind of the bits and bobs of iron underneath my arms, and they're actually sewn onto my doublet. So I put on a skirt, and there's some legs. Then I get the arms on. So that's me, right? This is all the under things before the breastplate. That's what I got there. Get the breastplate put on. That's actually metal. That's steel underneath. It's just covered with fabric to look fancy and to protect from rust. So I get that put on. And finally, my helmet. It's not me picking my nose, it's a string. That's and then I'm ready to go beat up Jeff Blossom. Why? Because he's too good in armor and he needs to die. So, and that's actually a castle in Long Island where we did that. It was actually based on, it's where Fitzgerald based Gatsby on. It's East Egg.
How come the armor only? It seems that the armor only covers like the front of the body.
No, it's both. Oh, his?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm attacking from the front. It should probably go all the way around though. I think he may have made the measurements when he wasn't wearing. I don't know. Jeff would have to tell you. Maybe he measured himself when he wasn't wearing them now. I don't know, but that doesn't go all the way around. It didn't always.
How much is all that stuff today?
That suit was way too heavy. That one weighed about 60 pounds, 70 pounds. It depends. It gets lighter. I'm having some much lighter stuff made for myself now. Interestingly, as you get more solid steel breastplate, it gets much lighter because you've got less mail. Mail is what's heavy. Also, mind you, that because of the law of cubes, right? An elephant twice as big when it weighs as a regular elephant wouldn't weigh as twice as much. It would be cubed actually, because as you expand volume, right? You're doing it in all dimensions. So me, right? I'm bigger than a medieval person in all dimensions. I'm not just taller, but I'm also wider and more muscular. So my armor to fit me is also going to obey the law of cubes, which is a big problem when you start getting on a horse and then you break your horse because horses haven't gotten that much bigger. Actually, medieval armor from this period, maybe 50 pounds or so, but remember, they didn't make it any thicker than they needed to, and it's attached to all parts of your body, so it's moving with you, and it's a lot lighter than you think it is, and easier with it.
Well, also, like the weight of armor, it's spread out over your whole body.
And it's spread out over your whole body.
So it's really not, it's a lot more flexible, right, as opposed to moderns. And like people think it's like really encumbrant, right? But in comparison to modern kits, those weigh a lot more than on your back.
You gotta be able to get on a horse and ride the horse and then fall off the horse after the horse gets killed, and then get up and get someone else's horse in the middle of the battlefield, and then kill some other guys, and then go and then like climb a siege tower. So yeah, you gotta be able to move. And they were fit. I mean, they trained all the time. By the time they're I'm about 40. By my age, I would have been done. I'd be like, I'd be trashed. I'm tired. I'm already so tired. Which brings us to the question of course, how do they fight? Well, besides by burying poleaxes into their heads. And this is the part where I get to show you the cool movie clips. And then Ben and I get to hit each other, because Ben's been very patient. Oh, the other question, how do we know about it? Other than this nice picture I stole from the Getty website. Well, they probably didn't fight like this. Let's do a movie clip.
Do we need to turn some lights down?
We need, and I said, here's a movie clip. No, bastard. Well, that's okay. We don't need to do that because I have all the movie files right here. Aha! Play quick time, I command you. So this is the Battle of Avenham from Fellowship. Before we pull down, go boom. Oh, I'm going to give a running commentary, by the way. This is going to be hilarious. This is going to be Mystery Science Theater Lord of the Rings. Where is the ring? Sorry, sorry. It's me. Smolder. 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 Kiss you. Yes. Frodo's ring shall remain inviolate. I was hoping that scene would be better than it was. All right, let's get to the violence. Come on, let's get your head to the violence. All right, that does it. We're fast forwarding. If you want to fight, I'll make you fight. Oh no, the orcs are coming. I'm going to go out here and now notice the orcs don't charge him or shoot arrows at him. They're just like going to yell at him. Make sure to salute the orcs before. Oh. And now, of course, because this is how. Now notice that much like movie ninjas, the orcs are just not like mobbing him, like not like let's go behind the stairs. Oh. And now he's Basil Rathbone going up the stairs, and they're slipping out one at a time. And then I shoot arrows at him.
Well, there's a lot.
And then, but thankfully they're so obsessed with the ring that they go after there and pile driver. Oh yes, and now suddenly it's World Wrestling, and oh good, it's Legolas, right? And he's still not dead. And of course, Legolas out there. I love that. Because that's how you use arrows. They make great stabbing devices. At least if you're an elf. Okay, running away. Anyway, let's slay some more people. All right. One at a time, some close shots, cut away, can't see it. This seems totally realistic as long as you're not applying critical thought. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Jackson. We're going to turn this off now because before I get even angrier. All right. Probably not like that. Let's look at another video. Let's look at this. Will this one work? No, these work at home though. All right, so here is another. Here's another video. This is just a very brief one. This is how, in actual martial arts scenario, what you want to do. So here we've got, I'm actually in Edinburgh in a very small room. But how do you keep people away? I've got one stick and tacking on each side, right? Try to keep them away. You want to drive people off. You want to keep moving. You don't want to just stand there. And of course, they're like kind of confused and like they're kind of hesitant. And there, of course, they've got the advantage. They've got a very, very big stick, and they've got little knives. So, kind of asymmetrical in a couple of ways. But you don't just stand there and you don't just do one person at a time. It's the best video I could find of that. I'm sorry. Let's look at, and this is the part where we're getting to the actual good part here. Here we go. Can you spot the things no one would ever do in real life in this video? Okay, this is just the most egregious example. Okay, Boromir's been shot full of arrows. Poor Boromir. There's lures, right? We need to get a bad guy for this. Suddenly, the orcs have bows. Apparently, the orcs don't use their bows in any sort of tactical manner. They just use their bows to, like, torture people. And here's Aragorn. Okay, so I have this pointy shield, and it's just wide enough for this dramatical thing. Okay. I'm rolling on the ground thing. Oh, I'm just going to punch you, right? Because you're down there. I can't like stomp on you or anything. I'm not going to curb stomp you. Like, oh. Let me yell at you some. Oh, let me. That was cool. And now we're going to bang our swords together for no good reason. Just to show you how much we hate each other. And because I'm Aragorn, I'm going to strike. And now I'm going to yell at you. And that's our climatic film. Okay. Things no one would ever do in a real sword fight.
Throw their shield.
Right. So, let's do a quick talk while I do my Mr. Rogers thing, change my clothes. Let's talk about movie sword fighting versus real life sword fighting. First thing, in medieval sword fight, in real sword fighting, you have an uncooperative opponent, right? I mean, face it. Viggo Morgenstern is not Aragorn, son of Arathorn. And whoever the actor is who plays Lurs, right? They didn't actually want to kill each other in that, did they?
Hopefully not.
No. No, hopefully not, right? That decapitation scene, CGI, sorry.
Oh, God.
So, very, very big, important difference. Uncooperative opponent versus a cooperative opponent. 2, in real fighting, you don't want them to know what you're going to do to them. I'm going to hit you right there. No. You hide, you deceive, you mislead the adversary. Whereas in a theatrical sword fight, right, instead of me trying to deceive the second person, I'm trying to show the third person, right? So say Ben and I are fighting, right? Instead of me trying to deceive him, we're both trying to show you, look at how good we're fighting, look at all our fightings, right? This is totally different, right? Trying to show something to the audience. Very, very different. 3, you want to defeat them, you want to kill them, you want to harm them, right? You don't want to. But in theatrical fighting, you only want to seem to harm them, right?
Acting.
It's acting, not to harm them. We want to show the audience, look, we're advancing our character development. Look how much we hate each other, right? So you want to make it dramatic, right? Oh, look, it looks like Aragorn's down. Oh, Lurs is going to go punch him for some reason, even though his feet are right there and he's got a sword. So, in a real fight, right? You watch real fights, you Google the YouTubes, right? Aesthetics are maybe of distant importance. Like someplace like way after fighting and surviving and getting a burger afterwards, like someplace down the list, we have aesthetics. We have looking pretty. Unless you're doing something like Schlagermeister or something very ritual, a duel, something ritualized. Whereas, and of course, there's the pucker factor is pretty big in a real fight. Whereas in theatrical fighting, obviously there's no pucker factor, ideally, unless somebody's real incompetent. And aesthetics are of primary importance. You want to look at. Question?
Yeah, at what point in history would you have people actually wanting to kill each other with swords and yet video cameras exist?
I am glad you asked. If you Google the YouTubes, you could see some machete fights from South America and Haiti. So that happens. I mean, people do that. You can find knife fights, you can find things like that, and see what actual fights look like with bladed weapons on YouTube. Or you can even go back and look at some old newsreels especially from before World War I, of epee duels, where they're not necessarily trying to kill each other, it's still first blood. But you're gonna see that even the jerky kind of, camera frame rate that they had back then, you're gonna see that these guys, there's a bit of adrenaline going on, right? It's not beautiful fencing. It's kind of like, there's a pucker factor. And of course, there's still ritualistic combat fought to this day. German fraternities fight Menser with Schlagers, which are sharp swords, and they can get pretty bloody, though they're not exactly dangerous. So, now we're on, finally, right? So Ben's gonna help me demo some techniques, right? So we're gonna have a bunch of things here. First of all, and can I get someone to operate the thing while I put my gloves on?
Sure.
All right, come on. So when I say next slide, you hit the down button. All right. Also stay out of the way of the swords. I can't emphasize that enough. Stay out of the way of the swords. All right. Cool. Okay, so for starters, you killed it.
I know, I shall kill you.
We had one job.
That's my job.
There we go. Okay, so first let's do some movie sword fighting. Okay, let's bang our swords together let's be Aragorn. Yeah, you ready? Doesn't that look good? All right, it's totally good. Now let me put my mask on, and let's see what happens when he actually hits me in the head with intent. Yeah, those are a bit different. It's a little more serious, right? So if we're actually fighting, right, there's a bit of footwork going on, and then something happens. Yeah, wait for it, in tempo.
Yep.
And, right, and something happens. Oh, I'm going to hit you. And then in the tempo, where I'm going to try and hit him. Boom, I'm hit. Don't be afraid to whack me. There you go. Good. So in a word, there's a deal of intent there, right? And he's coming straight at me. The blade angle is totally different. If we're not trying to hit each other, right? Everybody actually, the point's going to be up. If he's trying to hit me, the point is towards me, and I damn well better be wearing a mask, because I've tried doing stuff without masks in my life, and I've always lost an eye on several occasions. I always wear a mask now. All right, next slide, please. So in an actual fight, right? Remember how they're doing this? We're brushing swords. If I actually do this, what's Ben going to do?
He's going to
Right? Go. He's going to, yeah, as soon as he feels that, right, he feels the press, he's going to come off. He's going to, that's called a duplier, right? He's just going to, there. If I'm soft, right? If I'm soft, he's going to go right through and he's going to stab me, right? At any time that these blades lock, there's an opportunity to hit, right? So let's do it in real tempo, right? You attack me, I'll parry you, no. That quick, right? If I'm hard, if I'm soft, ready? Hup. Boom, that quick. That's what happens. You notice that also, if we're just banging the swords together, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. If he's renewing, do the renewed attack. Boom, and boom, 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 boom.
Oh, sorry.
Right? Hup, boom, boom. It's boom, boom. The timing is completely different. And they talk about this. They talk about this in the sources. They did. Great discussion of timing. Cool, next slide, please. Grappling. Oh, grappling. Grappling, our favorite. All right, so Ben's gonna do the grapple. Right, all right, first let's be Aragorn and Lurs, okay? Don't hit me, right? In real life, what do you want me to do? How do you want to set
So
up?
go high and grab you a little bit.
I'm going. Whoa, good thing I had dinner. I'm going, right? He wants to put me down. He wants to put me in a position where I am helpless to defend myself, right? It's not where, where I can in any way imaginably get free. Or, here, give me a strike right there. Hook. There. Right? I want to, that's only an adjunct, that's from Filippo Vadi. That's just an adjunct to killing him, right? It's just setting it up. It's not to set up this dramatic, oh my, it seems Lurs has really got it now, will he get away? Yeah. All right, next slide. Single time counters and counterattacks, right? Remember how it's bang, 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 bang? If I'll give you a Zornhab, just worship my head. All right? This is way too dangerous to do in an actual sword fight. In that actual sword fight. In a choreographed sword fight, you definitely want to do that in a real sword fight, because it works real good. What am I doing here? This is a single time counter. Do a parry riposte to show them the difference. Boom. And then you can do a wind or whatever, right? Boom. So 1, 2, right? He's made 2 movements, now do 1 movement. Before I finish, I'm hit. Okay? So in 1 movement. Way too dangerous for stage combat. Next slide. All right, also the variation of timing, right? Again with that. Ben doesn't want to be predictable, so let's just do like a feint of his worst and then his worst, right? So I'm here, we're fighting, he's going to do, boom. So you see he comes in, go do it again. He's going to be going, you see how he accelerated? There's an acceleration has to happen there. And no matter what, he doesn't want to be predictable. If we're actually fighting, I'm not going to be, I want to be making some fast movements, some slow movements, and then boom, there's an opportunity. I take the opportunity, you make an opportunity, and you take the opportunity. You want to add an element of chaos to it on purpose, so to disorder the other person so you get the opening. Okay, next slide. Finally, right, the fight happens in real time, right? He wants to use my movements against me. So we're over here, right, a little bit, get some retreating. So say, for instance, Ben's going to be really, really smart. Come a little closer. Say he takes a little step back. I'm going to follow him. As I follow him, he can hit me. there, he just uses that time against me, right? He wants to set me up for whatever sort of movement I make, right? And then there's the hit. So I think, oh, I'm just chasing him, he's running away, he's really afraid of me. No, he's deceived me, he's tricked me. This stuff is really, really subtle, right? You can't do this and show this in the movie because no one's going to get it. They did do it a little bit in the 40s because they actually knew how to fence, but they stopped doing it. It's like totally not done with theatrical fighting anymore. Oh yeah, we're going to not fighters, right? Same thing, right? Let's suppose I want to hit Ben. Right? In a movie fight, right? In a movie, right? Everything. So I'm going to attack you. He's going to parry. Here comes the repost, right? And boom. That goes there, right? Isn't this nice? Boom, boom, boom. Right? He gives me my chance, right? He gives me the turn to do whatever I want to do, so we can show you, and it looks really nice. He wants to use my movements against me. If I'm going to chamber here to strike him, as I do this, I'm hit. As I go, there we go. So any movement I make gives the other guy an opportunity to hit me. Okay, next slide. Finally, last thing I want to say, wasn't on the slideshow, is that if you're doing theatrical fighting, right, and doing it on stage, you're going to always be at a distance for safety reasons. But you saw, we were a lot closer, right? We were in our actual fencing distance. Thanks. Cool. We're in actual fencing distance because we're actually trying to hit each other, right? And we're wearing, obviously we're wearing protective equipment, but if we weren't wearing protective equipment, I'd be very dead right now because he hit me at like, a couple dozen times, right? So then I go back and call him Professor Mode. Cool. So I want to give a shout out to Maryland Kunstenspeckens, right? If you want to learn how to do this stuff, if you want to learn the actual medieval art of German fighting, they're a bunch of really great guys, and they are right around here, and I really recommend that you go to them for the educational training, and this is for all of you on the YouTube as well. Still taping, right? Mm-hmm. All right, cool. So definitely, if you're in Maryland, Mid-Atlantic area, definitely the best training you can get. Jake Norwood's a great guy. Okay, I'll take over the slideshow. No, I don't want to log into the internets. So let's talk about how we know about medieval sword fighting. Now, oh my God, light. So now that was a refreshing change. You see, if I got to get hit with a sword in my day-to-day lectures, well, I'd have a lot more brain damage than I do right now. But also my Western Civ one would be so much more interesting. So let's talk about my area of study, right? Let's talk about the festival, which I'm taking as a whole class of. Are you texting during my lecture?
No, I'm showing everyone what's going on.
Oh.
Yeah, it's okay, it's a visual.
Okay. I wish I got to threaten my undergraduates. Anyway.
You can threaten my students, it's fine.
But I just wish I had a crossbow. Are you texting? Not the bolt for your hand. Correct. I guess your screen's really cracked. All right. So let's look at the fact book, right? How many? You didn't videotape my threatening undergraduates, did you? Oh crap! All right.
There's always the editing process.
There's always the editing process. That's good because I don't have an edit button. From the 14th century, we just have two manuscripts. This is all well post-dates the Tolkien period, as it were. From the 15th century, we've got a few dozen more manuscripts and one printed work. And then in the 16th century, we start getting a lot of printed works and really hundreds of manuscripts. It's clearly something going on. There's also a huge rise of literacy, of course, in the 16th century. But exact numbers of these is really hard to define because there's new ones always being discovered. This was not a big Tolkien. We'll talk about Tolkien and Fechbooker in a bit. I'll ask the hypothetical question: would Tolkien have been a Hemaist? but we'll answer that in a moment. So clearly, I mean, as society changes, also we're getting more sources. Why are we getting more sources? We're getting more sources because society is becoming more literate. People are doing more writing. What's interesting is that even the later stuff is very backward looking. They're very much looking towards, grandpa's fencing as the ideal, in some cases at least. There's a strong conservatism to it. Now, as I mentioned, these are all post-David Lord of the Rings, right? We don't know how Vikings fought. Anything we do, sorry, is along those lines. It's going to be experimental archaeology. Some people have tried to come up with reasonable interpretations based on the surviving evidence. But again, any of this is going to be hypothetical. Roland Marcheska, for instance, I really like his Viking sword and shield system, but he's kind of looking at 133, which we'll see in a second, and kind of trying to transpose the techniques to an earlier sort of weaponry. Anyway, anything before that is going to be purely speculative, right? Of course, Peter Jackson is giving his characters this kind of late medieval equipment, right? The plate armor and the long swords. Yeah, they've got some shields, but really they want what's going to look good, and with the fight, with the way the guys want to make. So this though would have been really anachronistic for the early medieval setting. So could the peoples of Middle Earth have written a fencing book? Would the elves have done it? Well, the elves have, all the time in the world to do anything they want. But let's look at the real world context of fencing books. One, you need to be literate. You gotta know how to read and write. I mean, hard to write a book if you don't know how to read and write. Two, you gotta be able to construct a book, and that's really important because in the Middle Ages, it wasn't as simple as getting a notebook or something. Imagine this is a piece of dead sheep, right? You got a piece of vellum. And what you do, right, is you fold the thing up, you fold it up, and you fold it up, and you cut. You gotta plan it out. This is called transposition. You gotta plan out how you're gonna write a book, right? You have to know what you're doing before you're even doing it. In other words, you have to be able to not just organize information, but organize the physical object of the book. And that is hard. That is not an obvious thing to do, okay? Particularly when you're dealing with expensive things like sheepskin, right? Like prepared sheepskin. You need to know what you're writing about, right? You need to know how to sword fight. And you need to know how to organize information to teach somebody. I know lots of people who are excellent fencers. I know Olympic champions, right? I've met Olympic champion fencers who are the world's worst teachers because they know how to do what they do, but they don't know how to tell anyone else what they do. Right? This is organizing information. This is why it's so hard to be a professor. This is why we spend so much time. This is why we make so much money as college professors. It is because we spend all this time slaving over our PowerPoints, thinking of all this material we know about the Middle Ages and Tolkien and all these important, life-changing, world-changing things. And then we got to figure out how the heck we're gonna organize it, right? And then the university says, "Oh, can you do this as an online course?" And so we then have to change everything all around again. So you need to be able to do this. But fencing is even harder, right? Fencing is even harder because it's a physical pedagogy. How do you make somebody do the proper actions? It takes time. And finally, you need to have an audience. Because you could be, who's the guy I'm thinking of? Darting, the guy who did he was a primitive artist. He lived in Chicago. Edward Darger, right? He, just did this immense fantasy world in his own head, and of this apocalyptic war between these little girls and the forces of evil. Edward Darger, I think his name's Edward. You can look it up. But ultimately, you're not going to be writing for someone's for your own pleasure in the Middle Ages. You're writing for somebody. You need an audience. When I write a book, right, I have an audience that I expect is going to read it. You don't really do things like that if it's not for a reason. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of energy. So people want these books for some reason. And not all fact book writers, I should say, meet all these categories. I mean, some, like Talhofer's, are just kind of collections of techniques and vignettes, and like, what does this mean? But he had a reason for writing. He was trying to gain the patronage of a noble to be his fencing master. So there are special difficulties in writing a fencing book. One, as you noticed when Ben and I were demoing, right? Everything we do takes place in time. I was talking about the relative timing of actions, right? I draw my sword up. As I draw my sword up, Ben hits me in the head. How do I discuss that? How do I depict that in a flat, two-dimensional thing? How do I explain that to you? I could show it to you really easy, right? Hey, Ben, as I pick my sword up, hit me in the head, right? No problem. But how would I describe this to you if I wasn't here to show you? This leads to the need to develop a technical vocabulary, like any other art, like anything else. You got to say certain things. You got to say what to do. And you have to have certain organizing principles. In other words, I can't just tell you everything at once. I got to tell you thing one, and thing two, and thing three. And I have to do it not just in person, but writing it down. Let's look at some ways this was done. Oh, one more important point. These are not how-to manuals, right? These are not how-to manuals. I don't like calling them manuals. People sometimes call them manuals. I don't like calling them manuals because they're not manuals. A manual is like in the glove compartment of my car. There's a manual that tells me how to change the oil, or check the oil. It's not change it. They won't want you to do that. Or change the light bulbs, or this, that, or the other thing, or turn the brights on. Right? That's a manual. All right. You have military drill manuals from the 19th century. Okay, have all the soldiers line up and then have them march like this. That's a manual. These are not manuals. They're not even treatises, right? In the Renaissance, it's more, oh, this is my idea of how fencing should be done, right? This is, my ideas for reorganizing the art. What we have here is more like, more in keeping with medieval ideas of learning, which were following patterns. How did you learn to write elegant letters in Latin? You recopied other people's elegant letters in Latin. How did you learn to draw? You copied the master's drawings. How did you learn to fight? You went through the forms. You went through the kata, usually with the master. So this is a very, very different model of learning, not how-to manual. It's tied up with the entire medieval system of how people thought, including things like poetry. Tolkien loved poetry, right? Things like that. So then it begs the question, would Tolkien, had done this? If Tolkien probably would have really liked Fechbücher because he loved old languages and old books in this whole genre of literature, he probably would have thought this was pretty cool. At least I hope he would have thought it was pretty cool. But if knowledge of these books, especially the old German books, right? And these were pointing to old folk traditions of the sort that he was really into, would he have liked these? On the other hand, I think, he had enough of actual violence, I think, in his lifetime. And the violence in The Lord of the Rings is either idealized or terrifying. There's no intermediate. There's no, wow, cool. There's no professional wrestling, right? in Lord of the Rings. What's more, he loved folk knowledge, right? Can you see the gaffer writing down a book on gardening? Right? It just doesn't happen. I can't see that happening in Tolkien's world, in Tolkien's life. Right? So it's a step away from the sort of folk knowledge that he appreciated and that he liked, and it's a step towards modernity. I think he would have instinctually been against it, because as I'm going to discuss, these fencing books are very much a step towards modernity in a lot of ways. Let's discuss how that's. But before we do that, to satisfy the homicidal bibliophiles, let's take a look at some of these. Start, right? This is the so-called Walpurgis Fechbuch, manuscript 133, not I-33, it's Roman numeral 1. About 1320, 1325, translated by my friend Jeffrey Forgang. Comes from southern Germany, in a cathedral school, maybe in a cathedral school. This was made in a university setting. And it's got a monk, and he's, sorry, I should say a priest and his student, who's not a monk, but he's still clergy because it's a cathedral setting, right? The universities were run by the church back then. And also a woman named Walpurgis, and they are practicing sword and buckler fencing. Is this fighting? Is this fun? We can't really be sure. What we do know is that it uses a lot of the textual devices that are common to its era. For instance, the plays, the various techniques, if you're going to show a sequence of techniques, It begins with a cross, just like a liturgical book. That begins a section of prayers in a liturgical book. It shows these various ideas. It has technical words in German, which are kind of ambiguous. You can kind of figure out what some of them mean. Obviously, Langenort means a long point, but the rest are somewhat more ambiguous. What does this mean? This is the first fighting book we have. Is this a sport? Is this a combat art? Certainly they fenced for fun back in the day, for exercise. Why is there a woman? Why is there a woman named Walpurgis? What's she mean? My friend Valerie Eads has spent a lot of time trying to figure that out, but she can't, because there's no idea. There's no clue, right? Why is a woman doing this? What does it mean that they tried to write this down? Why have they started to try to do this? Are they trying to fix a kinetic art? Are they trying to write down this kinetic art and trying to make it stable? That's what books did in the Middle Ages. They took that which was impermanent, that which was passable, and they wrote them down. I promise I'm not going to be too much longer with this lecture. 2. Second book we have, and it's very different from the first. This is German National Museum Handschrift 3227A. It's in Nuremberg. And very, very, very different. Again, it's German. Why Germany? Why are the Germans writing this down? Does this have something to do with the structure of the free cities? The fact that you've got this town middle class that was very jealous of its rights in medieval Germany? This book, the fencing text, and there are several fencing texts by several authors in this book. Because this was one guy's collection. This is one guy's notebook. We call this a house book. And it also has alchemical recipes, like things for tempering iron. This is interesting, because what they're trying to do here is science. Okay? They're trying to write down a reproducible science of sword fighting, along with the science of tempering iron and steel. For instance, they make use of Aristotle's ideas of physics. Aristotle's Physics is a book about how the world operates, how the world works. This is, in other words, the subtext is that knowledge, right? Knowledge of these things, knowledge of fencing, knowledge of tempering iron, that sort of thing, it gives you power. This is also, interestingly, a first record of a possibly apocryphal fencing master named Johannes Lichtenauer, who a whole school of fencing going into this 16th century and even later is going to be attributed to him. And he occurs in many other fencing books through the 15th century through the 16th century. And it seems that there's something associated with the free cities of the Roman Empire, Johannes Lichtenauer, and this sort of writing tradition. What does this have to do with it? Is this their tradition? There's certainly other traditions in the Holy Roman Empire, noble traditions, etc. But why Lichtenauer? Why with this group? Finally, one of my favorites, because it's richly detailed and very, very well organized, is Fury di Liberi's Flowered Battle, which is from the Friuli region of what is now northern Italy, but it was not necessary. It's impossible to. I have no idea how one person could possibly be that loud. Anyway, but remember that geographical regions were rather fluid in the late Middle Ages, and that this was actually part of the empire. It's actually part of the Holy Roman Empire. So we can see this, even though it's Italian language, we could see this as perhaps continuous, perhaps one sort of German tradition that's not attested elsewhere. So we can't really see this as sort of a separate Italian-German thing. Such things didn't exist. There are language borders, but certainly the cultures are fluid. And it survives in 4 manuscripts. I'm not going to get into what the manuscript tradition is now, but these are from the Getty, the one that's in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, which is the nicest, at least to our eyes. And Fury is a lot more is a lot more meta than other writers of the time, right? This is only our third oldest known book. I can stay with most of the earlier stuff, but he's very meta because he talks about fencing books in his own career in a way that other writers don't. And he says that books are actually pretty rare, but you can't be a really good fencer, you can't be a good fighter if you don't have books. And he points the other interesting thing is that these are very, very detailed and rich books. And this is also the time when the Renaissance is about to happen, right? This is the birthplace of the Renaissance. This idea of writing down mundane things, right, of writing down practical arts, this is definitely something having to do with Renaissance culture. Tolkien would have hated it. So this is just a close-up of what the Getty book looks like. It's about yay big. It's very nice. And what I really want to get to, though, is talking about how he structures the work. Remember I told you about that textual pedagogy, how you're using that, using the ideas of how to convey information in this? Well, first thing, he organizes the whole book, at least this edition. Other copies start from horseback to wrestling. He starts here, wrestling to horseback. So let's start with looking at wrestling. First, he's giving these kind of like stances, right? Just like if you've ever done kung fu or karate or something, you've got various stances. You got the same thing here. It gives us a bunch of stances. Notice that they're all wearing crowns, by the way. Very, very significant that they're wearing crowns, because these are masters. These are giving you your first position. See, you start from some position. Here you've got, you want to demo this with me? Want to wrestle?
I don't know if you're right.
That's okay, you just got to wrestle. So, let's suppose Ben's just get me in a collar, right? Ben's got me in a hold here. Suppose I want to throw him off. What's he doing here? Well, that. So he's saying, first do this. Okay, stay there. Okay. Yeah, so I will. So first they said, oh, what do we do here? Okay, here, and then I can go behind, and then there's my throw. So he said, that's the follow-up technique. I mean, this guy is a scholar of the mastery. You can tell because he's got the garter. But wait, you get to win. You get to win. It's Fury. Come on. Does it count, master? So let's suppose that Ben doesn't want me to do that to him. You see what he's doing? Yeah, the guy. Yeah. So, okay. So I try to go here, and he goes what? No, he's actually pushing. Well, was he pushing? Yeah, he's trying to go for the. I'm trying to go across. Right? I'm trying to go across, and you push me away.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You push me away there. That's all it is. So he's saying this is how you. This is, how you the sequence of actions. Thanks.
Yep.
So that's just the first master of wrestling. There's a whole lot of this. And it goes into dagger defenses, it goes into sword fighting, it goes into combat with lances on horseback. And he uses all these this rich symbology, which unfortunately this got a little clip, but it's quite beautiful. So you've got the first guy, right? These are the four masters of the dagger. Fury says, someone attacks you with a dagger, first, take the dagger away. First and foremost, probably just take the dagger away, right? 2, break their arms. That's a good thing to do. Right? 3, this guy's got a key, right? Remember that in Romance languages, you don't lock a door, you key it. Right? So he's saying put them in the lock, essentially, put them in the joint lock. And you can't see it, but this guy has got a guy lying down under his feet, and he says, then kill him. Put him prostrate under your feet. So you notice it goes from the youngest, like the youth, to a mature man, to an older man, to the oldest and wisest, going in order of the things that you do, right? And they get progressively more innate, and they get more gilding, and they get much nicer. So he's got all these mnemonic tricks, all these mind tricks, to help you keep this in mind. Same way, this gives you, look, Mr. Frodo, it's an elderful. So, I was going to say that about you. So you've got these attributes of fencing that good fencer should have. So on top you've got that's a lynx. The lynx has dividers. Why does the lynx have dividers? Because dividers measure stuff relatively one against another. That's how you measure space and time. Not in absolute time, but you remember how we're varying the time in our fencing? By varying the time. So this is something that's very Aristotelian. It's found in 3227A. You have a tiger with an arrow for Legolas, for speed, because elves are fast. You have a lion with a heart for courage, of course. Anyone who's seen Wizard of Oz can tell you that. And of course, the elephant is for structure, right? It's for your strength. So these are all the attributes you should have as a good fighter. So again, it's this nice mnemonic kind of ideas. How do people train? Well, to be a good sword fighter, you got to be, and I swear I'm going to be just another 10 minutes. To be a good sword fighter, you got to practice every day, right? These guys, if you're a knight, that was your job. You practiced every day. One of our first sources is actually Norwegian. Tolkien was no doubt aware of it. It was the King's Mirror from the 12th century. Practice every day. Practice, put your heavy armor on, practice another man of the court, go out, whack each other around in the yard, right? Don Quixote gives us some other ideas in the 15th century. Do road work, go run, put your armor on, go for a run, go run up some hills, right? There's some stories about Jean Le Man, Jean the small man called Boucicault, who was Marshal of France in the late 14th, early 15th century, actually fought one of Fury's students. He used to climb up a ladder, the underside of a ladder in armor.
Whoa.
Keep spare armor and wooden training weapons, right? And fence with people who are better than you to learn new tricks. Of course, you know, how do they train in Tolkien? Mainly they walk around the countryside like English country squires. And it seems to grant them the ability to defeat orcs. So, go figure. But so maybe not so realistic in Tolkien. Yes?
Yeah, so did the literature talk about kind of bettering the physical form, like what areas of the body you would need to work on, make stronger?
They talk more about, well, it's Northern Europe and the Middle Ice Age. They don't take their clothes off a lot. You know, and there's definitely not the idea, I mean, that would be vain to talk about, you know, like, oh yeah, got a six-pack, right? These delts. They do talk about what your body should be like. So I think Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and Tolkien was no doubt aware of this, right? That you should be fat, you should have slim waist, right? Broad shoulders. They talk a lot about your breath, that you should work on getting strong and having, it was more about functional strength, right? It was more about you know, they're doing kind of medieval CrossFit and armor here, but they're really much more about functional strength, right? Don't be fat, right? But they're not thinking, oh, you got to build your delts and that kind of thing. Remember, they don't really dissect people either, and there's not a lot of a lot of knowledge of anatomy. I mean, there's obviously good functional knowledge of anatomy. Certainly, if you're going to be killing people, you're going to know with the parts, you know, where to stab them. But they're not saying, you know, but there's no thinking like, oh, you know, you really got to work on your quads to stabilize that ACL, right? Not like that. But it's more attributes, right? It's certainly not modern sports science, though it's certainly the predecessor, and they weren't stupid as far as that went. Okay. Final question, right? Does this mean nothing in Tolkien is accurate? Well, not really. Right? Not necessarily. Here's something from Fury. Who's that? It's Thorin, right? What does Thorin do? Why is he called Loki's shield? Because he picks up a piece of wood and uses it as a shield. Well, Fury actually shows the same kind of idea. He's got this trick with these, you know, you're attacked. Well, grab a piece of wood and throw it at him. Grab two pieces of wood. Throw one at him, then use the other to bat his weapon away and then stab him with your dagger. So there's definitely this idea of improvised weapons, doing what you have to do at the time. So that was just one interesting parallel. I really wanted to show this kind of Fury technique next to Thorin. So, kind of in there. Okay, next question, right? How do you actually fight in armor? Well, you hit a guy in armor with a sword. You saw the ATL guys fighting outside, right? You hit a guy in armor with a sword. It doesn't even like a big, heavy, like meat cleaver like they use. It's just gonna piss him off, really. So here's a bunch of techniques for fighting in armor. Here, I have a video I could show you, or I could just show you the slideshow, because we're running out of time. I'm not going to show you the video. But if you Google how to kill a guy in medieval armor, then you can see me beating up a West Point cadet with a longsword. It's really good fun. This is a photo shoot we did for the Higgins. This is me and my friend Bill. Dagger defense, right? Armored fighting, because you're invulnerable to weapons, often comes down to wrestling. You gotta be a good wrestler. Bill wants to stab me with the dagger. This is a Fury play, by the way. So I stop. And then I dislocate his shoulder. And this is another good lock. This is Fury's key. There you go. We did this in the basement of the Higgins. It was a photo shoot just to play with the stuff. In armor, of course, just the edge is useless, right? You can hit a guy with the edge for forever. So the whole sword is a weapon. So there, I'm going to use my crossguard as an axe and concuss him. There, I can use my point. I have a sword right here. I can use my point as a dagger. It makes it more rigid. I'm going to punch through that. Hit him in the head, right? Or I can use my, on the other side, I can use my pommel to concuss him. So these are all things you can do in fighting in armor. The whole sword is weapon. the murder sword, right? There I'm blocking it because I don't want Bill to actually kill me. The sword is also useful in wrestling. It's a lever. You can use it to execute all these great grappling things. You see I've got my leg behind Bill's, and I'm using it as a lever to throw him over. Or you can use it like the police use batons in order to have him on the lock there. That's the key, only using my sword. Question?
Yeah, so it's not that hard to just grab a sword by the hilt. You just do it with a naked hand.
Yeah, well, if you're wearing, you're wearing thick leather gloves, but also when you're holding the sword, and go, try it at home. Go home, grab a really sharp steak knife, and just grab it like this. It's not going to cut you. It's not. And then if you hold it, kind of insert it like this, it makes it even better. But if you have it here, if you draw it, you're going to get cut, right? That's what's going to cut you. Just like this, especially through thick, heavy gloves, it's not going to do anything. If you look on YouTube, there are videos of people taking sharp swords and actually, hacking coconuts and stuff with the hilt, and they're like, look, I'm not even wearing gloves, I just have a little mark in my hands. It's not going to hurt you, particularly if you're wearing goggles. It's not going to do anything. Oh, I like this one. There, so it's headlock with sword. It's great. I did that in a rapier tournament once. I used a fury move. Someone tried to pin my rapier. I was like, oh yeah, I grabbed the end of my own rapier and I threw him over. It was really funny. Because it was a armored longsword move, I just happened to use it in rapier. And of course, once you get someone on the ground, well, medieval style lobotomy. So, the point, right? Thrusting, you don't want to attack the plate, you want to attack the mail. You want to go for those mail joints because you can punch through that. Here, I've actually got it hooked up to my array on my breastplate, and I'm punching it through using my force. Not really. And all weapons are used the same. You can do the same thing with an axe that you can with a sword. So it's one system that's used for all weapons. You learn the reactions for one, you can use all of them. So there's that throw again, only I'm using an axe instead of a sword. And of course, an axe has got, the attention. You've got two sharp ends and a head to hook stuff. So their Bill's hooked my leg to pull me over. It's from Le Jeu de l'Hache, a French manuscript. So there you can just cast that down to the ground, and there's the follow-up. And of course, the spear is the same thing. It's a two-handed weapon. So there's spear, one end, right? Stick that in the joints of the armor. Or you can use it as a lever arm, just the same as you can use a sword, right? It's even more useful as a lever arm. So he blocks my point, well I just come around at that end and I throw him. Okay, what about horse combat? All right. So last movie clip. Okay. Let's talk about it. Let's do one more making fun of stuff. Here we go. My favorite movie clip. Okay, we're all gathered up. The cavalry's here. All the Rohirrim are here with their mail armor, very accurate. All the chevrons. Theoden, of course, is wearing 16th century anime style armor because he's Theoden. And he's looking, oh man, it's a target-rich environment. Ewan's pooping herself, Mary's pooping himself. The horse didn't start out well. Okay, enough character development. Oh, wait, someone knows how to command? All right, someone knows what they're doing here.
These are short pikes.
Well, making a pike wall. All right, I'm going to point out everything wrong with this. Okay. Now he gets ready. Now he gets a little Saxon configuration. A CGI army. Of course, it's all CGI, right? It's only the front right there that actually So there, okay. So notice they'll have 15th century chamfrons. Oh, they don't have spears, but there, uh-oh. So they've got orcs without pikes. Somehow they're going to do this riding to a stride. So he does something incredibly Mel Gibson. He does a Mel Gibson impression. It's got a nice voice. Well, that's cheerful. Now, okay. I would have loved being next to this. Well. Yay, screaming CGI shoulders. Very orderly CGI shoulders. Shofar, and now they go riding to battle. Notice that there's shields at their sides where they're going to do them no good. Okay? Okay. Hero shots. Notice that, first thing you can really tell it's CGI if you look just how early they are. They start breaking your head, or where you get the actual people. Again, the shields at the side. Oh, we can't ride with shields. We're going to freak out the horses. And then the orcs start shooting. Even though the orcs, yeah, handles. Useless thing, of course. And even though the horses go down, none of the horses behind them trip, as would actually happen. Oh, I got one, right? So, of course, none of the well. It's very heroic, isn't it? And of course, the orcs brand as well. So just because where's the pipeline? Pipeline done something. And here, you notice the CGI orcs are just swept away much more easily. I also notice that horses, real horses don't like charging into stuff. It's really hard to get, and just there. They're not slowed down at all. It's like actual horses don't like stepping on people. And then so they're just being swept away. It's just so easy when your opponents are computer generated. All right. Real life is not really like that. Where's my cursor? So in real life, no, I don't want that either. There we go. In real life, it's not that easy, right? So there's me on a horse. Here he does. First thing, you gotta know how to ride, like really well. All right. So obviously the Rohirrim know how to ride really, really well. The other thing you need is a horse that's not going to freak out. This horse freaked out and tried to kill me. Not very easy. So trying to get a horse to do this is not here. This is me auditioning a new jousting horse. Okay. I didn't wind up getting this horse. He was too small. But do you know how hard it is to get a horse that will just do that without flipping the hell out? That's it. Like, I'm going to take a big stick and sit on your back, and I'm going to hit this thing that goes round and around and around. And it looks really easy, like it's a stupid thing. I had worked with that horse for like half an hour to get him to do that. And, forget mowing down armies of orcs. I'm trying to like not die there. It's just, there's nothing easy about it, right? And that's why so many people use trap horses that just don't care. It's hard to find a good jousting horse. It really is. So, anyway, this is getting late, so I'm going to conclude. The conclusion is, why should we care about this? Why should we care about the spectacle, other than I get to show you cool clips of myself, like on horseback? Why should we care about this stuff? Why should we care about this fighting stuff? First thing, this is like, why should we study medieval history? Ideas of knighthood, ideas of chivalry led to modern parliamentary system. This is a big old argument that it's the relationship between members of the knightly class who, in their bro love, are slaughtering each other there in the tournament. He's got to see doesn't actually have him in a headlock on horseback, and he's not going to throw him off. They're hugging it out. It's a bit of bro love, right? And of course, these guys, distant descendants, are the guys who are going to sit down together and say, we should have parliament. So So this is one thing, right? That ideas of knighthood, ideas of chivalry, all of this, ideas of the tournament, which definitely show equality between people. It's definitely a statement of class. This is eventually going to give rise to modern parliamentary democracy. Second, the knowledge of violence in the medieval world. Remember that to have knowledge of violence, right, to be armed, is to be enfranchised. It's to be a political somebody. And therefore, it's key in the development, on the other end, of also modern democracies. What's your claim to having share in the government? By having the right to arms, right? In other words, the Second Amendment is it's correlated with American democracy. It's not for nothing that also the Swiss, right? In every Swiss home, there's an assault rifle. Why? Because the association of the Swiss pikeman, Swiss halberdier, right? Swiss soldier, with, of course, the independent Switzerland, right? Independent and nascently democratic Switzerland. Same thing, of course, with keeping arms and British militias. Fencing books, as I touched on, give us insights into how medieval people thought. There are ideas of science, pedagogy, teaching, the book, art, how they thought as well as how they fought. Finally, it's just really flipping cool with each other's swords. So, all right, so that was long. Wow, I didn't know that would take 2 hours. That was a long talk. Anybody have any questions while we're here? You can all applaud. Or not. Does anybody have any questions about anything? Or you just all want to go to sleep and finish? Questions? Yes.
Yeah, so this took people years to figure out. How old were you when you started actually learning this?